And back to work we go. So what is the region of reverse command? Go ahead.
Where it requires more power to fly slower.
Right. So it's to the left of the L over D max point for a jet airplane, where we're talking thrust exactly for a prop airplane, it's to the left of the minimum power required point, okay, which is actually also to the left of L over D max. Okay? So basically, when you're doing slow flight, you're in the region of reverse command. You got to pull the power back initially to slow down, but then if I'm flying at this velocity, I would require this much power to either go this speed or this speed, right? So it takes more power to go slower. Now, there is a way they word this on the test that can be a little confusing, where it talks about it takes less power to go faster and then power increases, or takes less power to slow down and then more power to go slower. You just have to be careful what you're reading to make sure you understand what they're saying. Okay? Gyroscopic force. So,
I have a question on that one right there.
yeah. Okay, so this is how I get everybody's attention. This is how you remember gyroscopic precession, okay? If I pitch up, it yaws right. If I yaw right, it pitches down. If I pitch down, it yaws to the left. And if I yaw left, it pitches up.
There you go.
Just not remember this question. Okay?
This yellow frame will rotate, or this black frame will rotate. And in these bearings here are shafted.
There you go.
So you spin it up as
Torque is in
gyro.
this direction, spin angular momentum is in this direction. Spin angular momentum will start to change the torque. Watch it. There it goes. Spin angular momentum is chasing the torque. You see exactly the same thing that I've shown you before. And if I make the torque higher, then the precession frequency will go up. See, it stops now immediately when I take it off. Put it back on again. Continues. Put more on it. Goes way faster. What happens now if I put the weight on this side? So I change the direction of the torque. If I put it on this side, torque is now in this direction. Spin angular momentum is in this direction. It's going to reverse direction. There we go. And you see it does. Amazingly non-intuitive. If you have problems with this, you're not alone. See you next time.
That is a college professor right there.
This is what you need to remember. Okay? You don't need to remember the video and all that, but you need to know what happens when you are pitched, what does the aircraft nose tend to do. Okay? So, what does torque roll do to the aircraft? It's right there in it, right?
Prop rolls right when so take the piece
Okay, so if I increase the power, then I increase the torque and it wants to go in the opposite direction. Newton's third law. Okay? Left or counterclockwise roll. P factor. Okay, it depends.
up or down.
Left or right yaw. So since our prop goes this way, if I pitch up, get a higher angle of attack, my downgoing blade gets a bigger bite out of the air and it's going to yaw to the left. If I put my nose down, the upgoing blade, and it goes to the right. This is gonna be a big factor while you're flying. You're gonna have to be playing with rudder and rudder trim all the time in this aircraft. That's a big old prop out there. Okay, so P factor is a big thing. Slipstream swirl always does what?
Get your rudder.
Always yaws the airplane to the left, okay? Basically what we're doing is we're creating an airflow across the airplane. It doesn't go straight back from the propeller because of the rotation, it actually swirls back. So it actually creates a situation on the vertical stabilizer where it's creating lift on the right-hand side of the vertical stabilizer, pulling it to the right and making the nose go left. So you gotta counteract that. That is most noticeable when?
Low speed, high power.
Low speed, high power, the beginning of the takeoff roll. Okay, this is why you gotta put a boatload of right rudder in when you put power up to take off. And then as you accelerate, you'll be backing off of that as that slipstream swirl actually gets more linear with velocity. Okay, you don't notice it at all at cruising type airspeeds. Gyroscopic position, again, up, down, left, or right, depends on what you're doing with the pitch or yaw of the airplane. Okay? So, torque roll, I correct with, what? Aileron. Your study guide says rudder. It's wrong. Okay? So, if we're rolling, we don't correct with rudder, we correct with aileron, right? That's been wrong for 50 years. What?
That's how slow we move here. Okay? Don't get any ideas.
Okay, C factor. C factor we said is going to go left, right, whatever. What do we correct yaw with? That is corrected with opposite to the yaw rudder. Okay? Slipstream swirl, it always says goes left, so we're gonna have to use right rudder. Gyroscopic precession, elevator or rudder, opposite of what it's doing. Okay? This is not something that you really pay a lot of attention to in an airplane. You don't normally see a whole lot of gyroscopic effect. We're gonna see this show up again, particularly when we're talking about spins. And that's when you see it the most. Yes?
For the test, for P factor, are we going to have to know if it is left or right, dependent on up or down? Do we have to know that?
You may have to know, if I lower my nose, it's gonna go right. If I raise my nose, it's gonna go left. Yeah, you have to know how that affects the airplane, yeah.
Speaking of that, will we have to know if it's like the ascending or descending blade, on which side?
I'm not sure whether they get into that much detail. I don't think they do, okay? It's just mostly what is the effect. Formula that I don't think he gives you, maybe he does.
It's the opposite of gyro.
Those are the two relative formulas. I don't know whether it's in the slideshow or not. Okay. So, turn rate, the radius depend on two factors, the airspeed, the true airspeed, and the bank angle. So, true airspeed is your V, bank angle is your tangent phi, okay? So what we can see here, the turn radius is relative closely to the bank angle and the velocity squared. So the turn radius with velocity goes up dramatically, okay? The rate of turn, you don't see as much rapid turn because this is just a V, not a V squared. So turn rate drops with increased velocity and the same bank angle. We're assuming the same bank angle, okay? And here's our time to turn 180 degrees. Okay? This is why the SR-71 took 2 states to turn around. Yeah, I mean, you're going 2,100 miles an hour, it takes a long way to turn around. Actually, I think it went quite a bit faster than that, that's what they said it could go. Anybody know anything about the speed record they set over the Atlantic? They hit a Mach 3 speed record over the Atlantic and refueled twice on the way. They had to slow down to 300 knots to refuel. So it seems to me like they're going a whole lot more than Mach 3 in between.
They have a good tailwind that day?
I don't know, but I'm just saying, the tailwind at those speeds, you know, might be 100 knots, that's not gonna make that much
You're
difference.
creating the wind.
Yeah.
And the altitudes they fly, I doubt that you have very much wind at all. I mean, you're above 100,000 feet, you're not seeing a whole lot of wind moving. So what is adverse yaw? Okay, so this is created with our ailerons, okay? If I drop the aileron, I've increased the camber of the wing, I raise it, I decrease camber of the wing. So if I increase camber of the wing, I'm increasing what? My induced drag. If I decrease, my induced drag goes down. So what happens is, like if I do this, I'm gonna roll this way, right? But because of the drag on this side, I wind up shifting in yaw this way initially before it catches up and starts turning to the left, and vice versa for the right. So, aircraft yaws opposite direction to the turn you're initiating due to unequal induced drag on the wings. Okay? Upgoing wing is producing more lift than the downgoing wing, therefore it's producing more drag, so it tends to pull back. Okay? You correct by coordinating with the rudder to overcome the induced drag. You will do this in slow flight, you will look at the induced drag demo. I do this in the sim all the time with students. When we go into slow flight, I say take your feet off the rudders, now rock back and forth, and you'll see the nose swinging initially in the wrong direction. That's okay, now put your feet on the rudders and coordinate. To coordinate properly, the ball stays in the center, and it tracks with the ailerons. Okay, what do I have to do a coordinated level turn? So first thing, I'm going to have to put pressure on the stick, right? One direction or the other. Okay? And then because of the induced drag, I'm going to have to coordinate with the rudder. So as I've got the stick deflected, I also have to have the rudder deflected to coordinate. Once I stop, then I neutralize both. Okay? So I don't have the induced drag anymore, and I'm going to stop the roll so I don't keep the ailerons deflected. Okay? So, moving in direction turn, neutral after turn established, applied in direction turn, neutral after a bank is established. Okay? Elevator. If I'm going into a bank, I have to increase my angle of attack to get the vertical lift to hold the airplane up in the air, which increases induced drag. So I'm gonna have to add a little bit of power, and I'm gonna have to add a little bit of backstick to keep the nose from actually falling off, right? So, stick elevator, back pressure, maintain altitude, TCL increase to maintain airspeed, balance ball should be centered in all the turns. Okay? What if I want to slip the airplane? Do I put in too much rudder or not enough rudder? Okay, so it's opposite the roll. So I either put in not enough or actually put in rudder opposite of the bank. And so I don't think I have a toy airplane back here anymore. So if I'm going around a left-hand turn, my nose is pointed outside of the turn and I'm slipping towards the inside of the turn. The ball goes to the inside of the turn. Okay? If I'm skidding, then I'm pushing the tail around the turn, right? So which one is more dangerous? According to your book. Skids are considered more dangerous. So here's what happens, why this is more dangerous. Now this isn't more dangerous at altitude, okay? But it's more dangerous in the final turn. They killed a lot of people in early aviation because of this. Okay, what happens is, guys are coming around the final turn, they look at their runway and say, oh, I'm overshooting final. So what do? Increase my bank angle, right? Still not working. So I apply some inside rudder to try to swing the nose around. Okay, what happens to the nose? I'm in this high bank angle, it goes down. So what do? Pull the nose up, induce the stall, boom,
Flip over and down you roll.
just right into the ground, okay? Now, if I'm slipping around the turn and I go into stall, what does it do? It goes this way. So I have a much greater chance of actually stopping this before going upside down into the ground. So the skid winds up being more dangerous in the final turn, and that's what happens, it just goes boom. As soon as it departs flight, the nose goes down into the ground, you got no chance to recover. So skids can be more dangerous. Load factor, also called what? G's, right? G's I'm pulling. So, basically, if I go into a bank, what happens to my lift vector? It starts going sideways, right? I still have to create enough vertical lift to support the weight of the aircraft. So if I'm moving this sideways, this has to stay, so I've got to increase the actual lift for the aircraft, which creates G forces, okay? So, my vertical lift has to be equal to the weight of the aircraft, so I've got to increase the total lift. This is what turns the airplane, the horizontal lift, okay? And here's a chart. We can see for 15 degrees of bank, there is very little G change. 30, we got a 15% change. So that's slightly noticeable, not a huge change. This is why when you do 30-degree bank turns, you actually have to add a little back pressure, okay? Keep the nose from dropping. We go all the way up to 60, now you have doubled. So between 30 and 60, you go from 1.15 to 2. Now they don't show here on 70, which is the one I always teach students, you go from 60 to 70, 10 more degrees, you add another whole G, goes up to 3. It shows that 85 degrees bank is 11.5. What happens at 90 degrees of bank? Infinite, right? You take infinite force to actually hold the airplane up, which you can't create, so you can't do it. You can't hold the nose up at 90 degrees of bank, right? So, interestingly enough, this is the range and everything like the F-16s and stuff operate in, where you're pulling 9 Gs around the turns, okay? So what is symmetric loading?
Just elevator.
Elevator only. There's no yaw, there's no roll, it's just simply pitch, right? If I've got any yaw or roll in there, it's asymmetric G's. So what is your symmetric G loads? -3 plus
7.
7,
For,
okay?
clean.
Okay? What if I configure the airplane? So it goes to -0, right?
0 to 2.5.
Configured is always 0, right? To
2.5.
2.5. Okay. What if it's asymmetric?
Clean.
-1 to 4.7, if I'm configured, 0 to 2. Okay? I've seen students crash the sim on ILS approach. Okay? You're configured, you're slow, you're coming down the ILS approach, you get high, and they go, poof, negative G's. And the sim says, you broke me. Okay? Because you exceeded the negative G limit for the G load. Okay? Straight pull with elevator only, asymmetric rolling or yawing, 7 to 3.5, 4.7 to 1, 2.5 to 0, 2 to 0. So if your flaps down, this is when you've got to really be careful with your G loading. make sure you don't exceed the limits. So, full or abrupt control inputs in one axis above what can cause structural damage? What's this called?
Maneuvering speed.
Maneuvering speed, okay? And this is considered to be 227 knots in the T6. This is what fighters definitely know, because that they want to actually be maneuvering very close to maneuvering speed, because they know they can really yank on the airplane and get max performance out of it, but not break it. Okay? So they really know their maneuvering speed in order to be able to maneuver. What's our max operating speed in the T6?
316.
Okay, 316, and what is that in Mach number? So as you go up in altitude, true airspeed goes up, okay? So this actually would be much higher true airspeed. We said with altitude, the speed of sound goes down. So as we go up in altitude and speed, then we actually can see the Mach indicator on our airspeed indicator starts showing Mach number. Okay? Okay. This is testing just to the limit load factor. Okay? They're not actually damaging the wing. Imagine sitting in that airplane going through turbulence and looking out and seeing that wing do that. I've seen that in the 135, flying through thunderstorms over the Pacific with a full load of passengers in that. Okay. Yeah, looking out there and you see the wings just flapping up and down. Okay. Now here's a really interesting, is permanent deformation bending of the wing if you exceed the limit load factor. Okay? You're not breaking the wing, but you're bending the wing if you exceed the limit load factor. Next video is ultimate load factor, which means what? You're gonna break stuff. Okay? So this is a test of the same wing, taking it up to the ultimate load factor. And they're gonna call out what percent of the limit load factor they're So 153% of limit load factor right there.
But is the definition for ultimate load at 150?
Kind of dramatic, isn't it? So in this case, they were testing to make sure it could reach the 150. They got to 154 before the wing actually broke. Okay? So what's your ultimate load factor in your airplane? Right there. Okay? Ultimate load factor is 10.5, right? So 1.5 times. So you can pull 7 Gs symmetric, and it's gonna flex those wings, but they're gonna go back to normal when you stop. You go over 7, they're gonna flex the wings and they're not gonna go back to normal. They're gonna stay bent. You go over 10.5, they're gonna break. Okay?
I feel like I might be having some problems at 10.5 Gs.
Do what?
Before the wings break at 10.5, I might be having some trouble.
It's really not that hard to do something like that if you've got enough speed and you're scared because you're pointing at the ground. You haul back on that stick. Okay? I know a guy that used to fly F4s that exceeded this, but not this, by pulling 12 Gs in his F4. Okay? He was diving out of the clouds in the middle of the night. He'd taken off at night in formation. Okay? and he noticed what altitude they went into the clouds, and they went lost wingman while they were flying formation. Came back solo, screaming en route descent, expecting to come out of the clouds at the same altitude he went in, but it wasn't, it was lower, and saw the car lights. Hauled back, pulled 12 Gs, bent the airplane, popped rivets, but he figured he was within about 1 second of dying. So he exceeded his limit load factor and broke, but actually just bent the airplane. But he didn't exceed his ultimate load factor, so he survived. Now I point this out, you really probably ought to know your ultimate load factor, because if you get into a situation where it's I pull past the limit, but not past the ultimate in order to save my life, I need to know what that is, right? So if I need to pull 10 Gs to keep from smacking the earth, I'm gonna pull 10 Gs. Keeps me from dying. Okay, so I messed up the airplane. They can put new wings on it. Okay. So it is a nice number to know, and you can see here, these are some pretty big numbers when we look at the limit load factors, 45,500 pounds of force. Ultimate load force, 68,250. Like, very, now, for you in the airplane, that's what you're feeling too, though, right? So, how much extra G limit does your G suit give you? About 1. So what really makes the difference is if you can do a really good AGSM. Okay? The airplanes here that we used to fly were placarded -3 +6. Because that's what the FAA requires for aerobatics. It was tested to +12 and didn't break. Okay? I do that from talking to the test pilots and stuff that make the airplane. So we used to go out and fly every day, aerobatics 5 to 6 Gs, no G suits. Okay? The airplane didn't have bleed air or anything like that. I had a 60-something-year-old IP working in my flight that went out 3 times a day doing aerobatics with students with 5 G pulls all the time, no problem. Okay? Because you get used to pulling Gs and you just automatically do a good AGSM and you don't even hardly even notice. Okay? 10 years after leaving that airplane, I had my orientation flight in the T6, and I was starting to gray out at 2 Gs. I totally lost all my G tolerance from just sitting on my rear for 10 years and not being out pulling Gs and stuff. So your body, after you do this for a while, you actually kind of, it becomes a reflex almost. So when you start pulling Gs, your legs and abdomen start tightening up, and so now when you get up past about 5 Gs, then you got to really start doing a really good AGSM, because like if you ever guys watch the centrifuge pictures, the guys doing 9 Gs, yeah, that'll really get to you. Okay, so here we have our VN diagram. Limit load factor. Okay, that's these lines right here. Okay, +7, -3. Ultimate load factor would be 1.5 times that. They don't show you on the chart. Asymmetric limit load factor are the dashed lines. Okay, so it really takes the chart down. Accelerated stall lines, and that's these curved lines. So basically what you're looking at here is, okay, if I'm doing 100 knots, if I pull over, what, 1.25 Gs, I'm gonna stall. I can't brake the airplane, okay? In this range, particularly between here and here, to the left of those 2 lines, I can't brake the airplane by pulling Gs, because I'll stall before it will brake, right? If I get up into the range for asymmetric above here, or here, or here, or here for symmetric, and I pull hard enough, I'm gonna bend the airplane, because it's gonna bend before it stalls. Okay? These, I don't even remember what the VMO and MMO are. Does everybody remember that from here?
Max operating?
Max operating, okay? So that would be for, generally speaking, you're 316, but as you go up in altitude, the chart basically shrinks. And the best explanation I have for that is, okay, these are indicated speeds. What happens to true airspeed as you go up in altitude? It jumps up dramatically, so you start getting the Mach number and everything because of that change. So
And
it
that
basically
even
shrinks the chart down.
The max Mach.
Yeah,
operating.
that's max Mach, that would be that, yeah. Yeah, this is one of the things when Mr. Rimmel did his slideshows, he didn't say, okay, this is what we're in there. Okay, yeah. Stability. Static stability is, the way you remember this is, static is the original tendency to go back to where it started. Dynamic is over a period of time. And what we see here is an airplane that is not dynamically stable, okay, but it is statically stable. So we get a deflection in something and it wants to go back to its original state. But because it's not dynamically stable, it passes by that and the amplitude increases over time. Okay? If it was a dynamically stable, it would go back and then this would dampen out over time. So, aircrafts that are designed to be stable are less maneuverable. Aircraft that are designed to be maneuverable are less stable. Just simply opposites of each other. Okay? So, cargo airplanes versus fighter airplanes. So here we see the two airplanes. It says they have relaxed stability, okay, meaning they are not, or they less pitch stable than a normal aircraft. T6 has a normal pitch stability, okay, it's not relaxed. So the B2 has negative static stability, which means if the computers weren't working, you would lose control of the aircraft. A human being cannot adjust quickly enough in that situation to maintain control of the airplane. Everybody know the axes of the airplane. We've been over this a little bit before already. Longitudinal is the axis around which we roll, but it is the pitch axis. Okay? Lateral is the one we pitch around, but it is the roll axis. Okay? So, roll, pitch, directional is yaw. Okay? That's the vertical axis. Okay? Make sure you understand which one we're talking about. And he adds in here, says, don't get longitudinal stability and lateral stability confused. That's the ones, the two that people get confused. Okay? So longitudinal, that's pitch. It's rotating around the lateral. Okay? Lateral is stability in roll, and it's rolling around the longitudinal. Okay. How do I increase my longitudinal or pitch stability? We talked about this a little before. If I keep my CG forward of the aerodynamic center, it generally produces a stable pitch attitude. And also, my horizontal stabilizer, basically if I pitch up, I'm creating an angle attack on the wing, but I'm also creating an angle attack on the horizontal stabilizer, which tends to pull the tail up and put the nose back down. Right? So it increases my pitch stability. Right? Lateral is my wing dihedral. So if I got tipped up wings and I roll a little bit, then the bottom wing here is actually producing more lift than the top wing, and it tends to right the airplane again. And in directional, it's the vertical stabilizer, because if I yaw, then I start producing a lift on the other side of the tail, which tends to put the nose back where it was. Cross coupling is between roll and yaw. Big airplanes tend to have this problem a lot more than little airplanes. The 135 used to Dutch roll. If we didn't have the rudder boost on, then we could quite typically get into a Dutch roll. Basically what happens there is if you get a deflection, okay, it has strong roll stability but weak yaw stability. So we get a little deflection, it starts coming back, but the nose is still going in the direction. And then this one goes down, okay, now it's coming back up, but the nose is going back the other direction. It makes this little figure 8 with the nose. Yes.
Does that like increasingly get worse over time?
It can get to the point of destroying the aircraft. Yes.
And there's isn't there a tanker story where that was the case?
Yeah, I think there is.
They never turned rudder power off? They just
Yeah,
had
we
it
we
on.
always left the boost on, but if we lost it, then the corrective factor for the Dutch roll was aileron only. Okay, stop the rolling tendency, and then you stop the Dutch roll. Didn't try to use rudder or anything. Okay. Two other cross coupling, adverse yaw. We already talked about that a little bit. You know, we drop the aileron down, and we're going to pull the nose off in the opposite direction we're trying to roll. That's the adverse yaw. Provost roll is mostly noticeable in highly swept back wings. So if I got a swept back wing and I yaw the airplane, now this wing has got a lot of, the relative wind is what though? Perpendicular to my core, right? Whereas this one now has got mostly parallel flow. So this wing is now gonna go up. So if I put the rudder in, I wind up rolling the airplane. I don't know if they're still demonstrating in the T-38 or not. This is one of the demos they used to give us, is we go up to altitude, push the rudder in, and just roll the airplane. Okay? You actually can see this even in Cessnas, because you push that wing forward and it actually starts creating more lift. Anytime you push a rudder in, you're gonna tend to roll the airplane a little bit. And this is PIOs, pilot induced oscillations. This one actually is because this was the first digital fly-by-wire system with no mechanical backup. So they hadn't actually perfected the fly-by-wire, okay?
That's moving camera, man. Holy cow, looks like a RC plane.
Okay. We have another, basically, way to get PIOs that are not airborne. It's when you're landing and you get into what? You get into what is called a porpoise. Porpoising. We used to joke about this.